This is a SAG1 assembly instruction. The manual applies to version 1.4. Older versions have a different structure and these instructions will not apply. First, print out all the elements. Here are the data for printing. If you can print them stronger, then do so. Here are the tools you need. 3 mm, 3.5 mm and 4 mm drill bits. Some pliers. A sharp knife. Allen wrenches for M2, M3, M4 screws. Lighter. A small screwdriver. File for flat and curved surfaces. I have it all in one, but you can have more. Screwdriver. This is the cheapest model. It works fine if you have something that costs more than $10. That's enough. We start assembling by installing M3 nuts in these places. In the second part, we only install 2 nuts on this side. On the road side, we install 3 nuts to the M4. We need to install M3 nuts in the brakes. Then screw in the same places the M3 screws, 8 mm long. The screw heads must protrude by 1 mm. Do not force them. So it has to be. The screws must protrude approximately 2 mm. We drill the brakes with a 3.5 mm drill bit. This is necessary if you want to thread the string through them. Use a screwdriver, of course. I'm just showing you where to do it. The brakes are installed to the main parts with 10 mm M3 screws. This is the complex part. Bolts and nuts must not protrude. We do the same with the second part. Grind the lever opening element with a file. There must be no burrs resulting from printing. You need a set of springs for the project. I bought them at the Auction store. At one time you could also buy them in Castorama. They may be slightly smaller in diameter. They can't be too strong. In the future I will try to design some adapters for the pen springs. However, 8 mm springs are much more secure. These springs must be cut more or less to such dimensions as in the movie. You have to adjust it individually. We install the springs in the following places. Insert an M4 screw with a length of 15 to 20 mm into the latch element. We grind this element with a file so that it enters without problems. Grind the upper protrusion so that there are no traces of layers or other burrs on it. We install the element. We put everything together. Lever latch should move side to side when button is depressed. We screw everything together with M4 screws with a length of 20 mm. Drill the fuse element with a 3 mm drill bit. Use a screwdriver for this. Install nuts for M3 screws in the trigger. Bulges will appear. You have to grind them or cut them off. The entire trigger is screwed with an 8 mm M3 screw. You also need a 4 mm diameter spring. You can take it from any pen. It needs to be cut to about 6 mm. We put it in the trigger. We put the fuse. It is screwed on with a M3 screw with a length of 8 mm. This is what a well-folded trigger looks like. After pressing the fuse, the tip should hide without any problems. Install the trigger as follows. We put the entire 4 mm spring into the round recess. We press the fuse and put the trigger. The drain is blocked with a M3 screw with a length of 6 mm. The lever is attached with a M3 screw 10 mm long.
We lock everything with a self-locking nut.
The lever on one side should be smooth and on the other side the nut should protrude. Put 2 meters 3 nuts into the cladding of the lever lock element. Insert 16 mm M3 screws into the second element. The whole thing is screwed to the lever. The wheels are screwed with an M4 bolt, 35 mm long, or a cut M4 bolt, 55 mm long. A cut bolt is better because it has no thread along its entire length and does not damage the lever under load. You have to use M4 washers.
If you do not do this, the pulleys will fuse with the lever due to friction.
You have to use a self-locking nut for locking. She is not in the film, but it should be. The bowstring rings should be installed in the same way as the previous rings. Also use the M4 bolt washers. Oh, and drill the holes for the circles with a 4 mm drill, so that all the wheels move without resistance. Also drill a 4 mm drill through the pinhole. We put everything together. We put M3 nuts into the magazine elements. Same on the other hand. At the end we put the M4 nut. We screw 6 mm M3 screws into the magazine elements. They are used to block the brake element and transfer the load from the brakes to the frame of the weapon. The element for the 3 mm pin is drilled with the same drill. Measure 4 mm on the drill bit and drill 2 element in the same place.
It should be 3 mm on one side and 2 mm on the outside.
The smaller hole is used to push the pin out.
The whole thing is screwed together with a 20 mm long M4 screw. The other side is screwed with a 20 mm M3 screw.
We install the arrow pusher.
We use 8 mm spring and 20 mm M3 bolt. Don't forget to drill through this hole, otherwise the 4 mm pin won't get in. You screw a M3 screw with a length of 40 mm into the element holding the cord. This bolt must sit very firmly.
If it is loose, use epoxy glue. You need a 3 mm by 20 mm pin.
Where to get such a pin, I will tell you in a moment.
We use an 8 mm spring to make the whole element springy. We block the whole thing with a 3 mm pin.
To assemble all this contraption, you need a 4 mm by 19 mm pin.
These pins can be obtained in 2 ways. The first is to cut the long M3 and M4 bolts. The second is to buy. I bought these on AliExpress. They are a bit thicker but also work.
I checked.
We put the whole thing on as in the video and move it as you move the lock on a firearm. We put the levers. The places that need to be set in one position are marked on the frame of the weapon and on the magazine. We push in a 4 mm pin. Everything works correctly. It probably won't work for you. I use a 3 mm parachute line to make the string. It is difficult to put on but withstands a lot.
He will use a slightly thinner link for presentation purposes.
Cut the line to about 55 centimeters. We weld one end. On the second, we make a knot and weld it too.
Make an eyelet from a thinner line.
And we install them in rolled rubber. This line is useful for tightening the rubber on the weapon.
Don't forget to file the ends, so that there are no sharp edges that could damage the rubber.
You need M3 washers with a total diameter of 9 mm. They are used to keep the bowstring away from the ailerons of the arrow. They are necessary.
We thread the cable through the brake.
We put on the washer.
We thread through the gun.
We put on the washer.
And again by the brake. We put on a loop.
We make an easily dissolving knot.
And we assume it all on the appropriate indentation.
It took me 20 minutes.
It will probably take you a whole day. Share your impression of the tutorial in a comment. Also, ask about folding weapons.
Useful questions and answers will be attached to the permanent. Look for answers there first.